Welcome to SoHo. As usual, this video is designed as an aid to exploration. Log off the computer, pull up this video on your phone, and go for a walk. Each time I'm done talking about a building, I'll throw up a map to get you to the next one. Pause the video and take a stroll. Indeed, feel free to wander off script for a while. I'll still be there when you get to the next site, and there's always another side street to explore. SoHo is London's oldest neighbourhood, laid out along with the downtown core in 1826. The area only developed a distinct identity, however, following the arrival of the Great Western Railway in 1853, cutting the area south of the tracks off from the downtown core to the north. In 1856, the Great Western was joined by both the London and Port Stanley and the Grand Trunk Railways, and the area began to develop along industrial lines. In the following years, thousands of immigrants flooded into the area, with 19th century SoHo forming the nucleus of London's Irish, Jewish, and Black communities. The establishment of large industries in the area cemented the district's working-class character, with the McClary Manufacturing, the London Rolling Mills, Silverwood's Dairy, and Labatt's Brewery all joining the railways as significant employers. Another major landmark in SoHo's history was the establishment of the City Hospital on South Street in 1873, a building which would eventually grow into Victoria Hospital, one of London's largest institutional complexes. In recent years, SoHo has been changing again, developing as a tech hub south of downtown, and emerging as one of London's most interesting neighbourhoods. The walk begins on the northeast corner of Waterloo and Horton Streets. London's second railway, the London and Port Stanley, led an unstable existence for its first half-century. The company laid tracks in 1856 between London and the lake at Port Stanley, an undertaking underwritten by the City of London. When the railway promptly collapsed financially, the city found itself in accidental ownership of a railway. For the following two generations, the railway would bounce between operators, buffeted by the changing political landscape at City Hall. A significant element of stability, however, came in the form of the Michigan Central Railway, a major American railway with operations at St. Thomas, which in 1887 purchased the right to operate their own trains on the tracks. They didn't, however, rent the London and Port Stanley's facilities in London, and hence needed to erect their own. This three-stall roundhouse was one result. The structure was designed to temporarily store locomotives before they returned to their St. Thomas terminal. The Michigan Central stopped using the facility in 1915, after which it served a variety of industrial uses before being completely renovated in 2015. Walk 2 blocks west on Horton Street to Clarence. Turn right and walk a block north to Bathurst. Wishing to erect suitably impressive facilities for their London terminus, the Michigan Central Railway hired the Detroit architect Frederick Speer to design an elaborate passenger terminal on the south side of Bathurst, just east of Clarence. Speer had worked with the Michigan Central before, and the London station showed a distinct family resemblance to the Michigan Central stations in Detroit and Ann Arbor, also designed by Speer. The Michigan Central Railway continued to maintain a terminal in London until 1915, when the London and Port Stanley electrified and the Michigan Central broke off its operations over the line. The station survived as a freight facility for several years thereafter, but was demolished in 1937. The large industrial building on the southwest corner of Bathurst and Clarence is the Hole-Proof Hosiery Building, erected in 1919 by the firm of Lockwood and Green, an American firm specializing in the design of textile mills. The company manufactured women's stockings, shipping its products across Canada. Turn around and walk 2 blocks south on Clarence Street to the intersection of Clarence and Simcoe. The parking lot on the northeast corner of Simcoe and Clarence was the site of the Simcoe Street Model School, designed by Thomas Tracy in 1887. An elaborate Queen Anne structure, the building was torn down in the 1970s, but the former gymnasium survives as a Buddhist monastery on Clarence Street. Continue a block south on Clarence Street to Grey Street, then turn left, walking a block east to Wellington. The church on the northeast corner of Wellington and Grey was erected in 1906, designed by the architectural firm of Moore and Henry. Its history speaks to SoHo's shifting ethnic character. When built, it served as the home of a German evangelical congregation. A generation later, in 1924, the structure was transformed into a synagogue, home of the B'nai Israel congregation. SoHo was, at the time, home to most of London's Jewish community, and the new synagogue joined an earlier one 3 blocks away at Richmond and Simcoe, which had been erected in 1899. A generation later again, in 1959, the building changed hands again, this time to the First Church of the Nazarene, who continue to occupy it to the present day. Across Grey Street, the fine brick church on the southeast corner of Wellington and Grey has lived a far less eventful life, being designed by Samuel Peters, London's first architect, in 1876, as the Wellington Street Methodist Church, a congregation which it continued to serve well into the 21st century. Walk a block south on Wellington Street to Hill Street. The building on the northwest corner of Wellington and Hill Streets is the Red Antiquities Building, erected in 1872 for Henry Winder, an Irish immigrant who lived on the upper floor and operated a grocery store below. One of the oldest surviving commercial structures on Wellington Street, the wooden structure was extensively restored in 2010. Across Wellington Street, the church on the northeast corner of Wellington and Hill was built in 1862 as London's second Anglican congregation, Christ Church, established to serve the developing South End and relieve overcrowding at St. Paul's downtown. Designed by William Robinson, one of London's earliest architects, the structure is an elegant Gothic building, featuring lancet windows and elegant columns in the nave. The church was home to an 1877 meeting, which led to the founding of the University of Western Ontario. Christ Church closed its doors in 2014. Walk a block east on Hill Street, then turn right, and walk a block south on Waterloo Street. After substantial debate, the City of London established a city hospital on the south side of South Street in 1873. The hospital was housed in a single, buff brick structure with a mansard roof and a central tower, designed by the architectural firm of Robinson and Tracy. While long gone today, the structure nevertheless served as the nucleus of a complex of hospital buildings, which eventually stretched along both sides of South Street, from Waterloo to Colburn Streets. The first major expansion came in 1894, when the hospital was renamed in honor of Queen Victoria, and a series of new buildings were erected along South Street, flanking the original structure. The 1920s were a period of dramatic expansion for the hospital, as a trio of red brick structures were erected on the north side of South Street. The structure on the northeast corner of South and Waterloo is the former Western Medical School, a classically inspired building erected in 1920 to plans by London architects Watt and Blackwell. The building housed classrooms for the training of doctors and laboratories and was shared between the University of Western Ontario and Victoria Hospital. Immediately to the east of the medical school is the Gartshore Nurses' Residence, designed by John Mackenzie Moore in 1926. The structure was designed as a residence for the nurses' school attached to the hospital. At the time, there was significant concern expressed about the potential for scandal with the placement of young female nursing students immediately next door to young male medical students. Construction, nevertheless, went ahead as planned. Yet further east, on the northwest corner of South and Colburn Streets, is the War Memorial Children's Hospital, designed by Watt and Blackwell in 1920. The structure was erected as a memorial to soldiers who had died in the First World War, and paid for by the Imperial Order of the Daughters of the Empire, a Canadian women's group. By the 1930s, the hospital was experiencing severe overcrowding, and in 1939, most of the Victorian portion of the complex was cleared away in favor of a new 8-story Art Deco structure, which dominated the south side of South Street. The new building continued to serve as the center of the hospital complex until the relocation of Victoria Hospital to the Westminster campus in the 1970s and 80s. Before heading on, note the Paying Patients Pavilion on the southwest corner of Colburn and South Streets, designed by the firm of McBride and Farncombe in 1898, and the sole surviving structure from the 19th century hospital. Continue a block east on South Street to Maitland, then turn right, walking 2 blocks south to the intersection of Maitland and Phillip. By the 1910s, Sir Adam Beck, the provincial politician responsible for the development of electrical power at Niagara Falls, was promoting the creation of a network of electrified railway lines across Ontario. Accordingly, when the operation of the city-owned London and Port Stanley Railway once again became a live issue in 1912, Beck jumped on the opportunity to demonstrate the value of railway electrification. After 3 years of work, the first electric train arrived in London on July 1st, 1915. With the need for an entirely new kind of maintenance facility, the Phillip Street car barns were erected in 1916, containing both the railway's maintenance facilities and many of its offices. To the east of the car barns, stretching for several blocks along the north side of the Thames River, was the McClary Manufacturing Works, a manufacturer of stoves and furnaces, shipping their products across the British Empire. The complex was demolished in the 1970s, following McClary's closure. Return up Maitland Street. On the northeast corner of Maitland and South Streets, you'll see the Victoria Tavern, home to a local bar continuously since 1933. Stop at the intersection of Maitland and Hill Streets. In 1873, the Roman Catholics established a mission church to serve the Irish Catholic immigrants living and working in SoHo. A plain wooden Gothic building designed by the architectural firm of Robinson and Tracy. The building stood on the south side of Hill Street, just west of Maitland. The church was severely damaged by fire in 1901, although services continued on the site until the completion of a replacement church on Lisle Street the next year. Continue a block north along Maitland Street to Grey Street, then turn left, walking half a block to Beth Emmanuel Church at 430 Grey Street. In the 1840s and 50s, London stood at the northern end of the Underground Railway, with hundreds of fugitive slaves establishing themselves in the city. Initially, nearly all of those individuals moved into the westernmost portion of SoHo. At the heart of their community, they established a chapel of the African Methodist Episcopal Church on Thames Street in 1848. Among other things, the structure was home to a lecture by John Brown, the famous American abolitionist responsible for the 1859 Harper's Ferry raid. In 1869, the city's growing African community needed larger premises, and a plot of land was acquired on Grey Street, upon which Beth Emmanuel Church, the present brick Gothic structure, was erected. The congregation maintaining close ties to London's African community to the present day. In 2013, following the announcement of plans to demolish the former Thames Street Chapel, a group formed with the intention of relocating the fugitive slave chapel to a site next door to Beth Emmanuel Church and open a museum on the site, a project which has met with significant success. From here you could return to the start of the walk by walking a block and a half west to Waterloo Street, and then 2 blocks north to Horton. Alternately, you could wander through the pleasant residential streets, which surround Beth Emmanuel in nearly every direction.